The sun had barely crested over the New Mexico Territory mountains when Rebecca Zimmerman stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Socorro, her worn leather boots hitting the dirt road with a determination that matched the steel in her blue eyes. But the crowd of men gathered outside the general store merely shook their heads at the sight of another foolish woman who thought she could tame this unforgiving land alone. It was 1878, and Rebecca had traveled from Pennsylvania with nothing but 2 trunks of belongings, her late uncle's deed to a struggling cattle ranch, and a heart full of dreams that most would call impossible. Her uncle, Marcus Zimmerman, had died 3 months prior without any sons to inherit his property, and in his will he had left everything to his only living relative. The lawyer's letter had arrived on a cold February morning, and by April, Rebecca had sold everything she owned to make the journey west. The heat struck her immediately as she stood in the street, watching the stagecoach driver toss her trunks down with little care. Socorro was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden structures that seemed to huddle together against the vast emptiness of the desert landscape. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing, and the sky stretched endlessly blue overhead. "Madam, you got someone meeting you here?" the driver asked, wiping sweat from his weathered face. "I am expected at the Zimmerman ranch," Rebecca replied, adjusting her traveling dress and trying to appear more confident than she felt. "I was told someone would come to collect me." The driver exchanged a glance with a man standing nearby, and Rebecca caught the skepticism in their expressions. She had seen that look before, would see it countless times in the coming weeks. A woman alone, attempting to run a cattle ranch in New Mexico Territory, was about as likely to succeed as a snowflake surviving in July. "That ranch ain't been doing well since Marcus took sick," the man informed her, scratching his graying beard. "Might be nobody left out there to come fetch you." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten but refused to let worry show on her face. She had corresponded with her uncle's foreman, a man named Isaiah Turner, who had assured her in his letters that he would help her transition into ownership. Those letters had been her lifeline during the long nights of preparation, filled with practical advice about ranching and surprisingly thoughtful observations about the land and animals. "Then I shall wait," she said firmly. "Perhaps you could direct me to somewhere I might take refreshment while I do." Before the driver could answer, the sound of hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. A rider approached at a steady pace, sitting tall in his saddle with the easy confidence of someone born to the land. As he drew closer, Rebecca could make out more details. A man in his mid-20s with dark hair that needed cutting, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of summer grass that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. He reined in his horse smoothly and dismounted in one fluid motion. When those green eyes landed on Rebecca, something flickered in them, recognition perhaps, or surprise. "Miss Zimmerman." His voice was deep and rich, matching the thoughtful tone she had come to know from months of correspondence. "Mr. Turner." Rebecca felt relief wash over her, though she kept her expression composed. Isaiah Turner removed his hat, revealing the full extent of his son's streaked hair and a face that was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way. He was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered and lean, with calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. Something about the way he looked at her made her breath catch for just a moment. "I apologize for not arriving sooner. One of the horses threw a shoe this morning, and I had to tend to it before making the ride into town." He gestured toward her trunks. "These all your belongings?" "Yes, that is everything." He nodded and began loading her trunks onto a wagon that Rebecca only now noticed, tied to a post nearby. As he worked, She studied him more carefully. This was the man who had written those letters, who had described the way the desert bloomed after rain, and how the cattle knew when a storm was coming hours before any clouds appeared. His letters had been surprisingly articulate for a ranch foreman, filled with details that showed not just knowledge but genuine love for the land. "The ride out to the ranch is about an hour," Isaiah said, finishing with the trunks. He helped her onto the wagon seat with a steady hand that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "I should warn you, Miss Zimmerman, the place is not what it once was. Your uncle was sick for nearly a year before he passed, and in that time, we lost some hands, sold off cattle we should have kept. It will take considerable work to bring it back." "I did not come here expecting ease," Rebecca replied as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "I came because this is my chance to build something of my own." Isaiah glanced at her, and she thought she saw approval in his expression. "Your uncle said you had spirit, said it ran in the family." They rode out of Socorro with the morning sun climbing higher, bringing with it the promise of brutal heat. Rebecca tried not to be too obvious as she studied the landscape, this strange new world that was now her home. The desert was not empty as she had feared. It teemed with life if you knew where to look. Scrubby plants dotted the earth and birds wheeled overhead. In the distance, she could see the dark shapes of cattle grazing. "How many head do we have currently?" she asked, falling easily into the practical discussions they had maintained in their letters. 217, Isaiah answered. "We should have closer to 500 for a ranch this size. Your uncle had to sell off stock to pay debts when he got too sick to manage properly. The remaining hands are good men, but there are only 3 of them besides myself. We need at least 6 to run things properly." Rebecca absorbed this information, her mind already working through the mathematics and the financial situation. Isaiah was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a rocky section of the trail. "There is money owed to the feed store in Socorro and to a cattle buyer in Santa Fe. Nothing we cannot manage if we have a good season, but it will be tight. Your uncle's lawyer should have provided you with the exact figures." "He did," Rebecca confirmed. "I brought what funds I had. It is not much, but it should help with immediate expenses." "That will be useful," Isaiah said, and she heard genuine relief in his voice. "I have been paying the hands from my own wages these past 2 months to keep them from leaving. Good ranch hands are hard to find." Rebecca turned to look at him fully. "You paid them from your own pocket." "Your uncle was good to me when I needed it most," Isaiah replied, his jaw tightening slightly. "I was not about to abandon his ranch or his memory just because times got hard." They rode in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that did not need filling with empty words. Rebecca found herself noticing small things about Isaiah. The capable way he handled the horses, the constant awareness in his eyes as he scanned the landscape, the faint scar on his left hand that she wondered about but did not ask. "The town does not think I can succeed," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I saw it in their faces." "No," Isaiah agreed, and she appreciated his honesty. "They do not think a woman can run a ranch. They will doubt you at every turn, question every decision you make. Some will refuse to do business with you simply because you are female." "And what do you think?" Rebecca asked, keeping her voice steady though her heart hammered. His opinion mattered more than she cared to admit. Isaiah was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he turned those green eyes on her, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "I have seen your determination in your letters, Miss Zimmerman. The questions you asked were not those of someone playing at ranching. You wanted to know everything: how to treat hoof rot, what to do during a difficult calving, how to read the signs of drought. You did not shy away from the hard truths I shared about the work and the risks." He paused, then added, "I think if anyone can prove this town wrong, it is you. But I will not lie and say it will be easy. It will be the hardest thing you have ever done." Rebecca felt something warm bloom in her chest at his words. Here was someone who did not dismiss her dreams as foolishness, who had taken the time to truly see the person behind the letters. "Then it is fortunate I have never been afraid of hard work." The corner of Isaiah's mouth quirked up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "No, I imagine you have not." The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, and Rebecca felt her breath catch for an entirely different reason. The main house was a long, low adobe structure with a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. It needed repairs. That was obvious even from a distance. Some of the wooden posts were weathered, and part of the roof looked like it wanted to cave in. But there was something solid about it, something enduring. Beyond the house stood a barn, corrals, and several smaller outbuildings. Everything showed signs of neglect, but nothing looked beyond saving. Cattle grazed in the near pasture, their red and white coats glossy in the sun. Mountains provided a dramatic backdrop, and Rebecca could hear the faint sound of running water. "There is a creek that runs along the eastern border of the property," Isaiah explained, following her gaze. "It does not run dry even in the worst summers. That water is one of our greatest assets." 3 men emerged from the barn as the wagon approached, curiosity evident in their postures. Isaiah pulled the horses to a stop in front of the main house and jumped down, then came around to help Rebecca descend. His hands at her waist were strong and steady, and for just a moment as her feet touched the ground, they stood close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Miss Zimmerman, these are the hands I mentioned," Isaiah said, stepping back and gesturing to the 3 men. "Tom Reynolds, Jack Murphy, and Carlos Delgado, they have been with the ranch for years." The men removed their hats respectfully, but Rebecca could see the uncertainty in their expressions. They were weighing her, wondering if they should start looking for work elsewhere or give this unlikely situation a chance. "Gentlemen," Rebecca said, meeting each man's eyes in turn, "I am grateful for your loyalty to my uncle and to this ranch. I know my arrival raises questions about the future. I can only tell you that I intend to do whatever is necessary to make this ranch profitable again. I will work as hard as any of you, and I will listen to your expertise, but I will make the final decisions. If that is something you can accept, then I hope you will stay. If not, I will understand and ensure you receive any wages owed before you go." The 3 men exchanged glances. Tom Reynolds, who appeared to be the oldest, spoke first. "Begging your pardon, madam, but have you ever worked cattle before?" "No," Rebecca admitted, "but I have run a boarding house for 4 years, managing accounts, supplies, repairs, and difficult personalities. I understand hard work and responsibility. What I do not know about ranching specifically, I intend to learn. Boarding house is a fair cry from breaking horses and branding cattle," Jack Murphy pointed out, not unkindly. "I am aware of that," Rebecca replied, "which is why I will be relying on the expertise of experienced men like yourselves. But make no mistake, I am not here to play at being a rancher. This is my livelihood now, my home. I will do whatever it takes." Carlos Delgado, who had been silent until now, surprised her by smiling slightly. "Your uncle, he said you were stubborn, said it was a family trait." "He was correct," Rebecca said. Isaiah, who had been standing quietly to the side, spoke up. "I am staying on. I believe Miss Zimmerman can succeed if we give her the chance to prove herself." The weight of his support was not lost on anyone present. The other men visibly relaxed, taking their cue from Isaiah's confidence. "Well then," Tom said, settling his hat back on his head. "Suppose we best get those trunks inside and show you around the place proper." The rest of the day passed in a blur of information and activity. The house was dusty but structurally sound, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, 2 bedrooms, and a small office that had been her uncle's domain. The furniture was simple but well made, and Rebecca could see touches that spoke of a life lived here. Books on a shelf, a worn chair by the fireplace, a view from the window that captured the mountains perfectly. Isaiah showed her the account books after the evening meal, spreading the ledgers across the kitchen table while the other hands retired to the bunkhouse. Rebecca lit extra lamps and settled in to review the numbers, her trained eye quickly picking out the story they told. Her uncle had been a good steward of the land but less skilled with finances. There were opportunities he had missed, expenses that could have been reduced. "He paid too much for feed last year," she murmured, tracing a column of figures. "We have grazing land. Why were we buying so much supplemental feed?" "Drought," Isaiah explained, sitting across from her. "The grass did not come in as thick as usual. The cattle needed more. And this payment to a Mr. Haverson in Santa Fe. $500 seems excessive for what is listed as consulting services." Isaiah's expression darkened. "Haverson convinced your uncle he could help improve the herd quality. He sold us a breeding bull that turned out to be nearly sterile. By the time we realized the problem, Haverson was long gone." Rebecca made a note in the margin. "So we need to rebuild the herd and improve breeding stock, all while managing existing debts and operating expenses." "When you say it like that, it sounds even worse than it is," Isaiah said, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. Rebecca looked up from the ledger and found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the weariness around his eyes. He had been carrying the burden of this place alone for months, she realized, trying to hold everything together while grieving the loss of a man he clearly respected. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything you have done, for staying when you could have found easier work elsewhere." "I gave my word to your uncle that I would look after this place," Isaiah replied, "and I meant it." "Still," Rebecca insisted, "not many men would have paid the hands from their own pocket or worked as hard as you clearly have to keep things running. I am grateful, and I want you to know that I see it." Something shifted in Isaiah's expression, a softness replacing the guardedness. "Your uncle saved my life once in a way. I was 19, angry at the world, making all the wrong choices. He gave me a job when no one else would, taught me about ranching and about being a man worth respecting. I owe him more than I could ever repay." "Tell me," Rebecca said, drawn in by the vulnerability in his voice. "Tell me about him. The letters from his lawyer were formal, and I barely knew him as a child." Isaiah leaned back in his chair, his eyes growing distant with memory. "Marcus Zimmerman was one of the most honest men I have ever known. Tough but fair. He believed in giving people second chances, but only if they were willing to work for it. He loved this land more than anything, talked about it like it was a living thing that needed tending and respect." As Isaiah spoke, Rebecca found herself captivated not just by the stories, but by the man telling them. There was genuine emotion in his voice, a depth of feeling that matched the thoughtfulness of his letters. She had known from their correspondence that he was intelligent and observant, but seeing him in person, hearing the warmth in his voice when he spoke of things he cared about, created a connection that mere words on paper had not prepared her for. They talked long into the night, the conversation flowing from ranch business to stories about her uncle to more personal topics. Rebecca found herself sharing things she had not intended to. The difficulty of being a woman trying to make her own way in the world, the loneliness of the boarding house even when it was full of people, the longing for something more than the narrow life society wanted to prescribe for her. Isaiah listened with full attention, never interrupting, never dismissing her feelings as female foolishness. When he shared his own story, his voice carrying equal parts pain and hope, she understood why her uncle had valued him so highly. He had grown up rough, his father a drunk who disappeared when Isaiah was young, his mother working herself into an early grave. He had fallen in with bad companions as a teenager, nearly ended up on the wrong side of the law. Marcus Zimmerman had seen something worth saving and had offered Isaiah a chance at a different life. "I learned everything from him," Isaiah said, staring into his coffee cup. "Not just about ranching, but about integrity, about doing the hard right thing instead of the easy wrong thing, about how a man's word should mean something." "He would be proud of how you have honored that," Rebecca said softly. Isaiah looked up, meeting her eyes across the table. "I hope so. I hope I can help you succeed here, Miss Zimmerman. Your uncle wanted this place to continue, wanted his legacy to mean something. Having you here, seeing someone from his own blood willing to fight for this ranch, it feels right." The intensity of the moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Finally, Rebecca broke eye contact and glanced at the window, surprised to see the first hints of dawn lightening the sky. "Goodness, we have talked the entire night away," she said, startled. Isaiah followed her gaze and stood stretching muscles that had stiffened from sitting too long. "You should get some rest. The hands will be up soon and ranch work starts early." "I intend to be up with everyone else," Rebecca informed him. "I meant what I said about working as hard as anyone." "I do not doubt that," Isaiah replied, moving toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame and looked back at her. "For what it is worth, Miss Zimmerman, I am glad you came. I think you and this ranch might be exactly what each other needs." He left before she could respond, his footsteps fading into the pre-dawn quiet. Rebecca sat alone in the kitchen, still feeling the echo of his presence, and wondered at the flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with nervousness about the challenges ahead. She allowed herself 2 hours of sleep before rising, washing in cold water from the basin, and changing into the practical clothes she had brought. A simple skirt, blouse, and boots suitable for work. When she emerged from the house, the sun was just clearing the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. The hands were already at work, and Rebecca followed the sounds to the barn where Isaiah was examining a horse's leg while Tom held the animal steady. They both looked up at her arrival. "Morning, Miss Zimmerman," Tom said politely. "Good morning. Please call me Rebecca. Miss Zimmerman sounds far too formal for people working together every day." Tom glanced at Isaiah, who nodded slightly. "If that is your preference, madam." "Rebecca," she corrected gently but firmly. "What are you working on?" Isaiah straightened, running a hand along the horse's leg one more time. "This mare came up lame yesterday." "I am checking for heat or swelling that might indicate a serious injury, but I think she just bruised her hoof on a rock." "What is the treatment for that?" Rebecca asked, moving closer to observe. For the next hour, Isaiah explained horse care while working, showing her how to properly examine an animal for injury, how to read signs of illness, how to understand the subtle communications of body language that horses offered. Rebecca absorbed it all, asking questions and even trying her hand at the examination under Isaiah's patient guidance. His proximity as he guided her hands to feel for heat in the horse's leg made her acutely aware of him. The solid warmth of his body behind her, the callous strength of his hands over hers, the scent of leather and sage that seemed to cling to him. She forced herself to focus on the lesson, on learning what she needed to know, but something about Isaiah Turner made concentration difficult in a way that was both frustrating and thrilling. Over the following weeks, Rebecca threw herself into learning every aspect of ranch life. She rose before dawn and worked until after dark, determined to prove she belonged. Isaiah became her primary teacher, showing her how to read the land, understand the cattle, manage the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. The town of Socorro remained skeptical. When Rebecca rode in for supplies, she faced barely concealed condescension from merchants who assumed she would fail. The feed store owner tried to overcharge her until she pulled out the account books and pointed out the discrepancy. The banker raised his eyebrows when she came to discuss the ranch's debts and made several patronizing comments about women and money management, right up until she demonstrated a better understanding of compound interest than he did. But it was Isaiah's quiet confidence in her abilities that sustained Rebecca through the doubts and difficulties. He never coddled her or made tasks easier because she was female. When she struggled to control a stubborn horse, he showed her technique, but made her work through it. When she made mistakes, he corrected her directly but without cruelty. And when she succeeded, his pride showed in his eyes and in the small, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. They fell into a partnership that felt natural despite its unlikeliness. Rebecca's head for business and Isaiah's ranching expertise complemented each other perfectly. She reorganized the account systems and negotiated better terms with suppliers, while he managed the day-to-day operations and taught her practical skills. They made decisions together, debating approaches over the account books in the evening and planning strategies for the ranch's future. One evening, about 6 weeks after her arrival, Rebecca was working with a young horse in the corral, practicing the techniques Isaiah had taught her. The gelding was spirited but not mean, testing her patience and skill. She could feel the eyes of the ranch hands on her, still evaluating, still wondering if she was truly committed or just playing at frontier life. The horse suddenly reared, spooked by a bird that flew up from the fence post. Rebecca held firm to the lead rope, using her body weight as Isaiah had taught her, speaking in low, calm tones. The horse came down, snorting and dancing sideways, but she maintained control. Her heart pounded with adrenaline, but she kept working, moving the horse through the exercises until he responded properly. When she finally led the gelding back to the barn, she found Isaiah leaning against the fence, watching. The approval in his expression made warmth spread through her chest. "You are a natural," he said simply. "I had a good teacher," Rebecca replied, meaning it. Isaiah opened the gate for her, their shoulders brushing as she passed through. That simple contact sent awareness tingling across her skin. Over the past weeks, she had become increasingly conscious of Isaiah in ways that went beyond gratitude or professional respect. She noticed the way he moved with unconscious grace, the rare smiles that lit his whole face, the kindness he showed to the animals, and the gentle respect he afforded her even when disagreeing with her decisions. But more than physical attraction, though that certainly existed, Rebecca found herself drawn to his character. Isaiah Turner was a man of integrity in a world where that quality proved rare. He kept his word, treated everyone fairly regardless of their station, and worked harder than anyone she had ever known. He was thoughtful and intelligent, their evening discussions ranging from practical ranch matters to philosophy and books they had both read. She was falling in love with him, Rebecca realized with a start. Somewhere between their late-night talks and early morning riding lessons, between his patient teaching and steadfast support, she had lost her heart to her uncle's foreman. The realization both exhilarated and terrified her. She had come to New Mexico to build an independent life, to prove herself capable of succeeding without needing to depend on a man. Falling in love felt like a complication she had not anticipated and was not sure how to navigate. Isaiah seemed unaware of her feelings, maintaining a professional distance even as their friendship deepened. Rebecca told herself that was for the best. She could not afford distractions, not when the ranch still teetered on the edge of financial ruin, and the town waited eagerly for her to fail. The cattle market in Santa Fe provided their first real test. The ranch needed to sell off some of the older stock to raise capital and make room for new breeding cattle. Isaiah recommended they make the drive themselves rather than selling to a middleman, as they would get better prices dealing directly with buyers. Rebecca agreed, though the prospect of a 3-day cattle drive intimidated her more than she wanted to admit. They set out on a Monday morning with 200 head of cattle, the 5 of them working to keep the herd together. Rebecca had practiced herding in small groups, but managing this many animals across open country proved entirely different. Dust choked her throat, the sun beat down mercilessly, and the cattle seemed determined to scatter in every direction. Isaiah rode beside her much of the time, offering advice and encouragement. When she grew frustrated with a particularly stubborn steer, he distracted her with stories. When exhaustion made her sloppy, he pointed out what she was doing wrong, but also reminded her how far she had come in just 2 months. They camped the first night under a sky so full of stars, it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. Rebecca had never seen anything like it back east, where city lights dulled the heavens. She stood apart from the camp, staring upward in wonder, until she sensed rather than heard Isaiah approach. "Beautiful, is it not?" he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "I had no idea the sky could look like this," Rebecca breathed. "It is magnificent." "One of my favorite things about this land," Isaiah admitted. "No matter how hard the day was, the night sky reminds me that there is something larger than our struggles." They stood in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching. Rebecca was intensely aware of how close he stood, how easy it would be to lean against him, to see if he would put his arm around her. But she held herself still, unwilling to risk the easy companionship they had built. "You did well today," Isaiah said after a while. "I know it was difficult." "I lost count of how many times I wanted to quit," Rebecca confessed. "My entire body aches, and I am quite certain I will never get all this dust out of my hair." Isaiah chuckled, the sound low and warm in the darkness. "That is ranch life, but you did not quit. You kept going even when it was hard, even when you were tired and frustrated. That is what matters." "Only because you and the others were there to help," Rebecca replied. "We are a team," Isaiah said simply. "That is how ranching works. No one succeeds alone." Rebecca turned to look at him, his profile outlined by starlight. "Is that what we are, a team?" Isaiah met her gaze, and even in the darkness she could see the intensity in his eyes. "I hope so. I hope we are friends too." "Friends," Rebecca repeated, the word somehow both comforting and disappointing. Something flickered across Isaiah's face, an emotion there and gone too quickly for her to read. He seemed about to say something more, but Tom called out from the campfire that coffee was ready, and the moment passed. They reached Santa Fe without losing any cattle, and Rebecca got her first experience of cattle market negotiations. The buyers initially tried to lowball their offer, clearly thinking they could take advantage of a woman rancher. But Rebecca had done her research, knew the going rates, and refused to budge. When one buyer became particularly condescending, suggesting she should let the men handle business matters, Isaiah stepped forward with a hard look that made the man reconsider his tone. Miss Zimmerman speaks for the ranch, Isaiah said flatly. You negotiate with her or not at all. The authority in his voice, the unquestioning support, made Rebecca's heart swell. Together, they secured a fair price that would allow them to pay down debts and purchase the breeding stock they needed. On the ride back to the ranch, lighter by cattle but heavier by a substantial bank draft, Rebecca felt genuine hope for the first time. They could do this. They could save the ranch. But if Socorro had been skeptical before, the town became outright hostile after word spread of Rebecca's successful market negotiation. She had proven herself capable, and that threatened the comfortable narrative that women could not handle ranching. Merchants who had been merely dismissive became obstructive. The blacksmith suddenly had no time to take orders for ranch repairs. The feed store owner claimed he was too busy to deliver their regular order. Rebecca handled each obstacle with determination, finding new suppliers when necessary, learning to do repairs herself when services were denied. But the constant battle wore on her, made worse by snide comments and barely concealed contempt from townspeople who should have been neutral at worst. It came to a head on a sweltering August afternoon when Rebecca rode into Socorro alone to pick up mail and a few supplies. She was tying her horse outside the general store when she overheard voices from around the corner of the building. "Give it another month," a man was saying. "She will run that ranch into the ground and have to sell. Then we can pick it up for a song." "Shame, really," another voice replied. "Good property wasted on a woman playing at ranching." "Playing is right. Heard she has Turner doing all the real work while she keeps the books." As if writing numbers in a ledger is the same as actual ranching. Anger flared hot in Rebecca's chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She walked around the corner to face the two men, both of whom she recognized as local ranchers with properties neighboring hers. "Gentlemen," she said coolly, "I could not help but overhear your conversation. I think you should know that I have no intention of selling my ranch, and while Mr. Turner is indeed invaluable, I assure you I am doing far more than keeping books. I have been working cattle, breaking horses, mending fences, and everything else required to run a ranch." The men had the grace to look embarrassed at being overheard, but one of them, a blustery man named Garrett, recovered quickly. "No offense meant, Miss Zimmerman, but everyone knows ranching is not women's work. You might be managing now, but come winter, come calving season, come the next drought, you will realize you are in over your head." "Perhaps," Rebecca said evenly. "Or perhaps I will surprise you. Either way, I would appreciate it if you would judge me by my results rather than my gender." She walked away before they could respond, head high even though her hands shook with suppressed emotion. Inside the general store, she conducted her business with forced calm, but by the time she rode out of town, tears of frustration pricked her eyes. She made it halfway home before the tears actually fell, hot and angry on her cheeks. She had worked so hard, learned so much, proven herself over and over, and still they saw only a woman playing at a man's work. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Isaiah must have been watching for her return because he met her at the barn, concern immediately crossing his face when he saw her expression. "What happened?" Rebecca dismounted and began unsaddling her horse with jerky, angry movements. "Nothing that matters. Just the usual skepticism and condescension." "Rebecca." Isaiah's voice was gentle but firm. He took the saddle from her hands and set it aside, then turned her to face him with hands on her shoulders. "Talk to me." The kindness in his eyes broke through her defenses, and suddenly she was pouring out the whole story. The overheard conversation, the constant obstacles, the exhaustion of having to prove herself every single day. Isaiah listened without interruption, his hands steady on her shoulders, anchoring her. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "They are wrong, about all of it. You are not playing at ranching. You are one of the hardest working people I have ever known, and you have learned more in 3 months than some people learn in years. You have a gift for this work, Rebecca. A real gift." "It does not feel like it," she admitted, her voice small. "It feels like I am constantly scrambling, constantly fighting, constantly trying to be good enough." "That is ranching," Isaiah said with a slight smile. "That is what it feels like for everyone. The difference is that you are judged more harshly because you are a woman, which is unfair and wrong. But Rebecca, look at what you have accomplished. We paid down the debts. We have a solid plan for rebuilding the herd. The ranch is stable in a way it has not been for over a year. You did that." "We did that," Rebecca corrected. "I could not have managed any of this without you." Isaiah's expression softened, his hands tightening slightly on her shoulders. "Then we are a good team. And teams stand together, support each other. So when the town doubts you, remember that I do not. I believe in you, Rebecca. I have from the first letter you wrote, asking intelligent questions and showing real determination. I believe in you, and I will keep believing in you even when you doubt yourself." Rebecca stared up at him, at the absolute sincerity in his green eyes, and felt something shift inside her. All the walls she had built around her heart, all the careful distance she had tried to maintain, crumbled in the face of his unwavering support. "Isaiah," she whispered, his name a question and a prayer. He seemed to realize how close they stood, how charged the air between them had become. His eyes dropped to her lips for just a moment before he stepped back, releasing her shoulders. "You should go inside and rest. It has been a long day." Disappointment washed through Rebecca, but she nodded and walked toward the house. At the door, she looked back to find him watching her with an expression that looked almost pained. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, Rebecca was certain he felt something too. But then he turned away, leading her horse into the barn, and the moment was lost. That night, Rebecca lay in bed staring at the ceiling and acknowledging the full truth of her feelings. She was deeply, irrevocably in love with Isaiah Turner. She loved his integrity, his intelligence, his quiet strength. She loved the way he treated everyone with respect, the patience he showed when teaching her, the rare smiles that transformed his face. She loved his hands, strong and capable, and his voice, deep and thoughtful. She loved who she was becoming under his guidance and support. But what could she do about it? Isaiah had given no clear indication that he returned her feelings. He was supportive and kind, but he maintained a professional distance that suggested he saw her only as his employer or perhaps a friend. Declaring her love might make him uncomfortable and ruin the effective partnership they had built. She could not risk that, not when so much depended on their ability to work together. Rebecca decided to keep her feelings to herself and focus on the work. The ranch was thriving under their joint management, and that had to be enough. The summer faded into fall, bringing cooler temperatures and the constant work of preparing for winter. They needed to ensure adequate feed was stored, that all the buildings were weatherproof, that the herd was in good condition to withstand the cold months. Rebecca worked alongside Isaiah and the other hands, learning to stack hay, repair roofs, and judge which cattle needed extra care. One afternoon in late September, they were working together to fix a section of fence that had been damaged by a falling tree. The physical work felt good, satisfying in a way that Rebecca's previous life never had. She might be tired and sore at the end of each day, but she was also proud of what her hands had accomplished. "You have gotten strong," Isaiah observed, watching her drive a post into the ground with solid strikes of the mallet. Remember when you first arrived and could barely lift a saddle?" Rebecca laughed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I remember you very tactfully showing me proper lifting technique while pretending not to notice how I struggled." "I was not pretending," Isaiah said with a grin. "I noticed, but I also saw that you were determined to figure it out. You did not ask for special treatment or expect us to do everything for you. You wanted to learn." "I had good teachers," Rebecca replied, then added more softly, "especially you. I could not have done any of this without your support, Isaiah. You believed in me when no one else did." Isaiah set down his tools and turned to face her fully. The afternoon sun caught in his hair, and his expression was serious. "I saw your determination in your letters, Rebecca. From the very first one, I knew you were different from what the town expected. You asked real questions, hard questions. You did not romanticize ranch life or expect it to be easy. You wanted the truth, and you were not afraid of hard work. That kind of determination, that kind of character, it is rare." The intensity in his voice made Rebecca's heart race. They stood in the dappled shade of surviving trees, the sounds of the ranch distant, and it felt like they existed in a moment outside of time. "Isaiah," Rebecca began, not sure what she intended to say but needing to say something. A shout from the direction of the ranch cut her off. They both turned to see Jack riding hard toward them, and the urgency in his posture immediately put them on alert. "Fire!" Jack yelled as he got closer. "Lightning strike started a grass fire about 2 miles east, and it is heading this way." Isaiah was moving before Jack finished speaking, gathering tools and running toward the horses they had tied nearby. Rebecca followed, fear and adrenaline surging through her veins. Grass fires in this dry country could devastate everything in their path. The next hours blurred into frantic activity. They joined Tom and Carlos, who were already trying to create fire breaks by clearing vegetation in the fire's likely path. The smoke was visible now, a dark smudge against the blue sky that grew larger by the minute. The wind, which had been mild, picked up, pushing the fire faster. Isaiah organized them efficiently, sending Carlos to move the horses to safety, directing Tom and Jack to focus on protecting the barn while he and Rebecca worked to create a wider fire break. They dug and cleared with desperate speed, their hands blistering, sweat soaking through their clothes despite the approaching evening cool. The fire reached them as the sun set, a wall of flame that roared and crackled. Rebecca had never experienced anything so terrifying or awe-inspiring. Isaiah stayed close to her, directing her efforts, and twice he pulled her back from danger when the wind shifted unexpectedly. They fought through the night, exhausted and coughing from smoke, but determined not to lose the ranch. The fire break held in most places, though flames jumped it twice, requiring desperate work to beat them out before they could spread. At one point, a burning branch fell near Rebecca, and Isaiah bodily shoved her aside, taking the impact himself. His vest caught fire and she frantically beat out the flames with her gloved hands while he rolled in the dirt. "Are you hurt?" she gasped, helping him sit up. "Fine," he coughed, though she could see the pain in his eyes. "Are you?" "I am fine because of you," Rebecca said, her voice shaking. They did not have time for more conversation. The fire still raged, and there was work to do. But something had shifted again between them, an acknowledgement of how much they meant to each other even if the words remained unspoken. Dawn broke over a blackened landscape, the fire finally exhausted after burning through everything in its path, except the ranch itself. They had saved the buildings, the barn, the livestock. Exhausted, filthy, and injured, the 5 of them stood together surveying the damage. "We did it," Tom said, his voice hoarse from smoke. "Lord help us, we actually saved it." Rebecca felt tears track through the soot on her face, but they were tears of relief and pride. They had faced disaster and prevailed through teamwork and determination. She looked at Isaiah, who was favoring his left shoulder where the branch had hit him, and felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly buckled her knees. Over the following days, as they recovered from the fire and began assessing damage to the grazing land, the town's attitude toward Rebecca began to shift. Word had spread about how she had fought the fire alongside her hands, how she had not retreated to safety, but had stood her ground and worked to save her ranch. The narrative of the foolish woman playing at ranching became harder to maintain in the face of such clear evidence of her commitment. The change was not universal. Some people remained convinced that Rebecca's success was temporary, or that Isaiah deserved all the credit. But merchants who had been obstructive became neutral, and a few even grudgingly respectful. The feed store owner admitted he had been wrong to judge her so harshly. The blacksmith agreed to take on their repair work after all. "You have won them over," Isaiah said one evening as they reviewed accounts. His shoulder was healing, though Rebecca had noticed him wincing when he moved too quickly. "Not all of them," Rebecca replied. "And those who have changed their minds only did so because I proved myself on their terms. I should not have had to nearly die in a fire to earn basic respect." "No, you should not have," Isaiah agreed quietly. "It is not fair the way women are judged more harshly, given fewer chances. But you have proven something important, that you have just as much right to work this land as any man." Rebecca set down her pen and looked at him across the table. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the healing burn on his cheek from the fire. He had been injured protecting her, had put himself in danger without hesitation. "Isaiah, why did you push me out of the way that night? You could have been seriously hurt." Isaiah met her gaze steadily. "Because I could not bear to see you injured. Because the thought of anything happening to you is unacceptable to me." The air between them changed, charged with everything they had been carefully not saying for months. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why?" she asked, though she thought she knew the answer. She needed to hear him say it. Isaiah stood, moving around the table to stand before her. He reached down and gently took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her own work-roughened skin. "You know why, Rebecca. You must know." "Tell me anyway," she whispered. "Because I love you," Isaiah said simply, the words falling into the space between them like stones into still water, creating ripples that would change everything. "I have been falling in love with you since your first letter, and every day since you arrived has only deepened those feelings. You are the strongest, most determined person I have ever known. You are intelligent and capable and so beautiful it takes my breath away sometimes. You have honored your uncle's legacy and made this ranch into something better than it was, and I love you with everything I am." Rebecca stood on shaking legs, her hand still clasped in his. Tears blurred her vision as she looked up at the man who had supported her from the beginning, who had believed in her when no one else did, who had become essential to her happiness. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I have been trying not to, trying to stay focused on the ranch and proving myself. But Isaiah, you have been the best part of every day. Your faith in me, your patience, the way you see me as capable and strong rather than just a woman out of her depth. I love who you are and who I am with you." Isaiah's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb gently wiping away the tears on her cheeks. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid. You are my employer, and I did not want to presume or make things uncomfortable. And I thought maybe you wanted to focus on the ranch, on building your independent life. I did not want to complicate that." "You could never be a complication," Rebecca said, covering his hand with her own. You are part of everything good I have built here. We are partners, Isaiah. In the work and, if you want, in everything else. Instead of answering with words, Isaiah lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Rebecca responded, rising on her toes to press closer, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of months of denied longing and powerful emotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. I want everything with you, Rebecca. Partnership in the ranch and in life. I want to wake up next to you every morning and work beside you every day. I want to build a future together. Yes, Rebecca breathed. Yes to all of it. They married in early October in a simple ceremony at the small church in Socorro. The same townspeople who had doubted Rebecca now filled the pews, witnessing the union of the determined Eastern woman and the cowboy who had believed in her from the start. Tom, Jack, and Carlos stood as witnesses, proud of the couple they had watched fall in love over months of hard work and shared challenges. Rebecca wore a simple dress the color of cream, and Isaiah wore his best suit, cleaned up and handsome in a way that made her heart skip. But what made her breath catch was not his appearance, but the look in his eyes as she walked toward him. Pure love and commitment, a promise of partnership and support that went beyond mere words. The preacher spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of working together through life's challenges. Rebecca barely heard him, too focused on Isaiah's hand holding hers, the solid reality of his presence beside her, the future spreading out before them full of possibility. When the preacher asked if she took Isaiah as her husband, Rebecca's "I do" rang out clear and strong without hesitation or doubt. And when Isaiah promised to love and honor her, she heard the absolute truth in his voice. Their kiss as husband and wife sealed not just their marriage but the partnership they had been building since her arrival in New Mexico. They were a team, united in purpose and bound by love. The wedding celebration was held at the ranch, with neighbors and townspeople arriving to share food and music. It was not a grand affair by Eastern standards, but to Rebecca it was perfect, simple, genuine, and full of warmth. People who had doubted her now offered congratulations and good wishes, acknowledging that she and Isaiah had built something worth celebrating. As evening fell and stars began to appear, Isaiah pulled Rebecca away from the crowd. They walked to the rise overlooking the ranch, the same view she had seen on her first day, though so much had changed since then. "Happy?" Isaiah asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Rebecca replied honestly. "When I came here, I was focused on proving I could succeed alone, on building an independent life. I did not expect to find love, to find a true partner." "Your uncle would be pleased," Isaiah said softly. He wanted this ranch to continue, but more than that, he wanted the people who worked it to find fulfillment and happiness. "I think we have honored his memory in the best possible way." Rebecca leaned into her husband's warmth, looking out over the land they would work together. The ranch was thriving, the herd growing, the financial situation stable. But more important than any of that was the partnership they had forged, built on mutual respect and deepening love. "To think the town doubted I could ranch," Rebecca mused. "And here we are, not just surviving but thriving." "I never doubted," Isaiah said, turning her to face him. "I saw your determination in your letters. I knew you would succeed." "We succeeded," Rebecca corrected. "Together." Isaiah kissed her under the stars, and Rebecca felt complete in a way she never had before. She had found her place, her purpose, and her love in this harsh, beautiful land. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and deepening love. They managed the ranch as true partners, making decisions together, supporting each other through challenges, and celebrating successes. The cattle herd grew, the debts were fully paid, and the ranch became profitable. But more important than financial success was the home they built together, filled with laughter and affection and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work. The town of Socorro fully accepted Rebecca now, and several other women approached her about their own dreams of independence. Rebecca found herself mentoring others, sharing both the practical knowledge she had gained and the belief that women were capable of far more than society generally allowed. Isaiah remained her constant supporter and partner, never threatened by her competence or achievements. Their love only grew stronger as they worked side by side, learning to read each other's moods and needs, supporting each other through frustrations and failures as well as triumphs. 2 years after their marriage, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The joy on Isaiah's face when she told him made her heart swell almost painfully. He became even more attentive, though he never tried to prevent her from continuing ranch work. They simply adjusted her tasks as her pregnancy progressed, and the ranch hands stepped up to take on more of the physically demanding work. Their son was born in the spring of 1881, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him Marcus, after the uncle whose legacy had brought them together. Isaiah held his son with tears streaming down his face, and Rebecca felt a completeness she had not known was possible. Motherhood added another dimension to Rebecca's life, but did not define her completely. She continued managing the ranch's business affairs, often with baby Marcus sleeping in a basket near her desk. Isaiah proved to be a devoted father, comfortable with the baby in a way that surprised some of the more traditional townspeople, but seemed natural to Rebecca. They shared parenting duties as they shared everything else, as partners. As Marcus grew, they added to the ranch gradually, purchasing adjacent land when it became available, increasing the herd, building a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. The ranch that had been struggling when Rebecca arrived became one of the most successful in the territory. More importantly, they built a family. 3 years after Marcus came a daughter they named Sarah, a quiet child with her father's green eyes and her mother's determination. 2 years later, twin boys arrived, keeping the household lively and exhausting in equal measure. Through it all, Isaiah remained Rebecca's anchor and partner. They still spent evenings reviewing accounts and planning for the ranch's future, though now the conversations often happened with children climbing on them or demanding attention. The work was endless, the challenges constant, but they faced it all together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaiah took Rebecca back to the rise overlooking the ranch where he had proposed. The view had changed over the years. More buildings now, better fences, a larger herd grazing in the distance. But the mountains still rose purple in the distance, and the sky still stretched endlessly overhead. "You ever regret it?" Isaiah asked, his arm around her waist in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Coming here, taking on the ranch, all the struggles." Rebecca looked at the land they had built together, thought of their children sleeping safely at home under the care of a trusted neighbor, considered the life they had created. Not for a single moment. "This is where I was meant to be. This is what I was meant to do. And you are who I was meant to love." Isaiah pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "I knew from your letters that you were special, but I could not have imagined how much you would change my life, how complete you would make me feel." They stood together as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber, and Rebecca felt profound gratitude. She had come to New Mexico territory seeking independence and the chance to prove herself. She had found that and so much more. A true partnership, a love built on mutual respect and shared dreams, a family, and a home. The town that had once doubted whether a lady could ranch now pointed to Rebecca Turner as proof that determination and capability mattered more than gender. Young women who dreamed of unconventional lives came to her for advice and encouragement. She became known not just as a successful rancher, but as someone who had challenged expectations and won. But to Rebecca, her greatest success was not the thriving ranch or the respect she had earned. It was the partnership she had built with Isaiah, the love they shared, and the family they had created together. He had believed in her when no one else did, had seen the determination in her letters before they ever met, and had supported her in building a life beyond what either of them could have achieved alone. As they walked back to the house, their children's laughter drifting out to greet them, Rebecca squeezed Isaiah's hand. He smiled down at her, that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. Their story had begun with letters and doubt, with a woman determined to prove herself and a cowboy who believed she could. It had grown into a love story as vast and enduring as the New Mexico territory itself, built on hard work, mutual respect, and unwavering faith in each other. The ranch prospered under their joint management for decades to come. Their children grew up learning that hard work and determination mattered more than gender, that true partnership meant supporting each other's dreams, and that love built on respect and shared values could withstand any challenge. Marcus grew to be a thoughtful young man who inherited his mother's head for business and his father's love of the land. Sarah proved to be a gifted horse trainer with a natural empathy for animals. The twins, always competitive, pushed each other to excel in different aspects of ranch work. But they all learned the most important lesson from watching their parents, that the strongest foundation for any life was partnership built on love and respect. They saw how Isaiah and Rebecca made decisions together, supported each other through difficulties, and never lost sight of their essential equality despite the world's expectations. As Rebecca and Isaiah grew older, they gradually handed over more of the day-to-day management to their children, though they remained active in ranch operations well into their later years. They spent their evenings on the porch they had finally repaired and expanded, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors, talking about everything and nothing the way they had since those first nights after Rebecca's arrival. "You remember that first day?" Rebecca asked one evening, her hand clasped in Isaiah's weathered one. They were both gray now, their faces lined by sun and time, but the connection between them remained as strong as ever. "How nervous I was, how uncertain. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met," Isaiah replied. "Coming all this way alone, willing to risk everything on a dream. I remember reading your letters and thinking that anyone with that much determination and intelligence would succeed at whatever they set their minds to." "I saw your determination in your letters," Rebecca quoted, remembering the words that had meant so much to her in those early days of doubt. "You have no idea how much those words sustained me when everyone else thought I would fail." "You proved them all wrong," Isaiah said with pride. "You proved that a woman could ranch as well as any man, that determination and intelligence matter more than gender. You changed minds and opened doors for others. That is a legacy to be proud of. We did it together," Rebecca insisted, as she always did. "I could not have succeeded without you, without your support and belief and partnership." Isaiah brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "Then we are both lucky. We found each other when we needed it most, and we built something beautiful together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, the ranch humming with activity around them. The legacy they had built was not just in the land or the cattle or the successful business. It was in the family they had created, the example they had set, and the love that had sustained them through decades of challenges and triumphs. When Rebecca finally passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, with Isaiah holding her hand and their children and grandchildren gathered around, her last words were of gratitude for the life they had built together. Isaiah followed her 6 months later, unable to bear the world without his partner and love. They were buried together on the rise overlooking the ranch, the spot where he had first told her he loved her, and where they had spent so many evenings watching the sunset. Their children continued the ranch operations, honoring the partnership model their parents had established. The family story became local legend, the determined woman who had come from the East to prove she could ranch, and the cowboy who had believed in her when no one else did. Their love story was told and retold, inspiring others to believe in the power of partnership and the strength that comes from supporting rather than limiting each other's dreams. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each successive generation adding to and improving upon the foundation that Rebecca and Isaiah had built. The account books that Rebecca had so carefully maintained were preserved as family treasures, showing not just financial records, but the story of how one woman's determination and one man's faith had built something lasting. But perhaps more important than the physical legacy was the example they had set. They had shown that true partnership knew no gender limitations, that love built on respect and shared dreams could overcome any obstacle, and that believing in someone's potential could change not just their life but the world around them. The town of Socorro eventually erected a small plaque commemorating Rebecca Turner and her contributions to the territory, acknowledging that she had challenged assumptions and proven that capability mattered more than gender. But those who knew the full story understood that the real memorial was not a plaque, but the thriving ranch, the family who continued to work it with the same partnership principles, and the changed attitudes about what women could achieve. Isaiah and Rebecca's story was one of love and determination, of partnership and faith. It began with letters between two people who had never met, grew through challenges that would have broken weaker partnerships, and endured through decades of building a life together. They had faced skepticism and prejudice, natural disasters and financial hardships, the endless challenges of ranch life and raising a family. Through it all, they had remained true partners, supporting and believing in each other. In the end, the greatest testament to their love was not the material success they achieved, but the way they had lived their lives, with integrity, mutual respect, and unwavering faith in each other's capabilities. Isaiah had seen Rebecca's determination in her letters before they ever met, and that faith had given her the courage to succeed when the entire town doubted she could. She had proven them all wrong, but never alone, always with Isaiah beside her as an equal partner. Their love story became the kind that people told around fires on cold nights, the kind that inspired others to believe in possibilities beyond what society prescribed. It was a reminder that the strongest loves are built on partnership, that true support means believing in someone's potential even when they doubt themselves, and that determination combined with faith can overcome any obstacle. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the desert grass and the mountains stood eternal against the sky, some said you could still feel their presence on that rise overlooking the ranch. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. The story of Rebecca Zimmerman, who became Rebecca Turner, and Isaiah Turner, who believed in her from the first letter, lived on as proof that love, partnership, and determination could change not just individual lives but the world itself. They had faced doubt with faith, challenges with teamwork, and the future with shared dreams. And in doing so, they had created a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Their children carried forward the values their parents had instilled: equality, partnership, hard work, and unwavering support for each other's dreams. The ranch continued to prosper, but more importantly, the family continued to embody the principles that Rebecca and Isaiah had lived by. Each generation learned the story of how their family began, of the determined woman who refused to be limited by society's expectations, and the man who believed in her when no one else did.